The Silent Frontier. The Vorkarian ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday. Commander Elena Reyes stood motionless on the command deck of the EDF Intrepid, Earth's flagship defender, as the alien transmission played for the third time. The holographic display showed a tall, willowy figure with silvery skin and four glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. High Admiral Zelvox of the Vorkarian Empire spoke in perfect English, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance that made the hair on Elena's arms stand on end. Humans of Earth, your expansion into the Orion Arm constitutes an infringement upon territories claimed by the Vorkarian Empire. You were warned. You persisted. This defiance will not stand. You have 48 Earth hours to withdraw all colonial operations and submit to our authority, or face annihilation. You wanted this conflict. Now you will witness our power. The transmission cut, plunging the command deck into silence, so profound that Elena could hear the soft hum of the life support systems. Around her, 24 of Earth's finest officers stared at the empty space where the alien's image had been, their faces pale under the harsh lights. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Jackson broke the silence, his voice surprisingly steady. "Vorkarian warships have been detected emerging from hyperspace at the edge of our solar system. Initial count places their fleet at over 300 vessels." Elena closed her eyes briefly. Earth's combined defense forces numbered just over 70 ships, and that included vessels recalled from the furthest colonies. They were outgunned, outmanned, and facing an enemy with technology centuries beyond their own. "This doesn't make sense," said Dr. Mailin, the fleet's chief xenoanalyst. "The Vorkarians never showed any territorial interest in this sector before. We've had probe data showing their activities for years, all concentrated around the Triangulum galaxy border, nowhere near our expansion corridor." Elena nodded. "Something's changed. But why now? And why claim we wanted this war?" The bridge fell silent again as the implications settled in. Earth had never encroached on any claimed territories. Their expansion had been careful, methodical, and preceded by extensive diplomatic outreach attempts. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Santos from the communications station, "we're receiving something unusual. It's coming from within the Vorkarian fleet, but on an old Earth frequency, almost like someone's trying to reach us using our own outdated tech." Elena frowned. "Put it through, but maintain security protocols." A burst of static filled the command deck, followed by a voice. "Human, female, desperate. Earth Defense Force. This is Dr. Naomi Chen of the research vessel Horizon. We've been held captive by the Vorkarians for 3 years. This transmission is risky, but you need to know, they're afraid of you. Their leadership is terrified of human potential. The attack isn't about territory. It's about eliminating a future threat. They've studied us for decades. They know our weaknesses, but their primary battle systems have a critical vulnerability. Their quantum shielding." The transmission cut out abruptly. "Get her back," Elena ordered, but Santos shook his head. "Gone, sir. They must have detected it." Elena's mind raced. Dr. Naomi Chen and the Horizon had disappeared on a deep space research mission 3 years ago, presumed lost to a catastrophic engine failure. If they'd been prisoners all this time. "Admiral Harrison is calling an emergency council," Jackson reported. "All fleet commanders." 6 hours later, Elena found herself in a secure briefing room deep within Luna Base, Earth's primary military installation. The collected intelligence was grim. The Vorkarian fleet was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. Ships the size of small cities, weapons that could tear through Earth's best shields like paper, and propulsion systems that allowed them to outmaneuver anything in the human fleet. "We have no chance in a direct confrontation," Admiral Harrison stated bluntly, his weathered face grave as he addressed the gathered commanders. "But surrender isn't an option either. Intelligence suggests the Vorkarians don't take prisoners. At least not en masse. Dr. Chen and her team appear to be exceptions, likely kept for research purposes. What about the vulnerability she mentioned? Elena asked. The quantum shielding. Dr. Wei Zong, Earth's leading physicist on advanced propulsion and shielding technology, stepped forward. Based on our analysis of Vorkarian energy signatures, their quantum shielding operates on a frequency-locked system, incredibly powerful, but potentially susceptible to harmonic disruption. English, Dr. Harrison growled. They're using a shield system that vibrates at specific frequencies to deflect attacks. Zhang simplified. If we could generate a counterwave, a harmonic disruption pattern, we might be able to create momentary windows of vulnerability. How momentary? Asked Commander Rodriguez of the Southern Fleet. Milliseconds, Zhang admitted, but potentially enough for a precisely timed strike. Elena leaned forward. And how do we generate this counterwave? That's the problem, Zhang said, his expression falling. The energy requirements are enormous. We'd need to channel the output of multiple fusion reactors simultaneously through a specialized array, something we haven't built. Elena thought of the 48-hour deadline. 36 hours remain now. What if we modified the dark matter collectors from the Titan mining operation? She suggested. They're designed to capture and channel exotic energy forms. Zhang's eyes widened. Potentially, yes. With significant modifications, they could serve as the foundation for a harmonic disruptor. But the targeting would have to be perfect, and we'd only get one shot. The energy discharge would burn out the collectors. Harrison looked around the room. This is the only option that gives us even a sliver of hope. Commander Reyes, I'm putting you in charge of Operation Phoenix. You have 30 hours to make this work. Elena's heart raced. It was nearly impossible, but it was their only chance. She thought of Earth, of the billions of lives hanging in the balance, and of the strange message from the Vorkarians. You wanted war. They hadn't wanted war. But they would damn well finish it. There's something else, she said, an idea forming. The Vorkarians claim we wanted this conflict. What if that assumption is their weakness? What if we can use their misunderstanding of human nature against them? Harrison raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We need to understand why they believe we provoked them, Elena continued. And we need to establish communication with Dr. Chen again, if possible. She's been among them for years. She might know more about this vulnerability than she had time to transmit. As the briefing disbanded, Elena gathered a small team of the brightest minds available, engineers, physicists, and tactical specialists. The plan that emerged was audacious, desperate, and required precision beyond anything they'd attempted before. The Vorkarian fleet continued its slow, deliberate advance, a psychological tactic designed to instill fear as the massive ships gradually filled more of Earth's sky, a demonstration of inevitability. 24 hours before the deadline, Earth made its move. A small, seemingly unarmed vessel departed from Luna Base, broadcasting on all frequencies a simple message. Vorkarian High Command, we seek parley. As expected, the Vorkarians permitted the approach of this single ship, a show of supreme confidence in their overwhelming power. What they couldn't know was that the diplomatic vessel contained the prototype harmonic disruptor, powered down to appear non-threatening on scans, and a specialized communications array designed to search for and lock onto the specific frequency Dr. Chen had used. Elena stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, watching through the eyes of the small team aboard the diplomatic vessel, led by Dr. Zhang himself. We're within range, came Zhang's voice through the secure channel, beginning passage scan for Chen's transmission frequency. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, contact. Weak but present. She's transmitting data packets, extremely compressed. Downloading now. Elena held her breath. This was the linchpin of their entire strategy. Download complete, Zhang reported. Transmitting to you now. And Commander, the Vorkarians are bringing us aboard their command ship. This was both expected and necessary. The disruptor needed to be close to the Vorkarian flagship to work effectively. But it meant Zhang and his team were almost certainly sacrificing themselves. Understood. Elena replied, her voice tight. "Godspeed, Doctor." As Zhang's team was escorted into the massive Vorkarian vessel, Elena and her analysts pored over the transmitted data. What they found changed everything. Dr. Chen's intelligence revealed that the Vorkarians had intercepted and misinterpreted a series of Earth's deep space transmissions. A peaceful human exploration initiative called Project Ascension had been mistranslated in Vorkarian language as Operation Uprising. Human scientific curiosity had been interpreted as reconnaissance for conquest. But most critically, Chen had included detailed schematics of the Vorkarian quantum shield system and confirmation that the harmonic disruption theory was sound. 6 hours to deadline, Jackson reminded Elena as she finalized the battle plan. Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the tactical display, showing Zhang's team now deep within the Vorkarian flagship. Begin Phase 1. All Earth vessels move to holding positions, and broadcast this message to all Vorkarian ships. The message was simple but carefully crafted based on Chen's cultural insights. You misunderstood our intentions. We never sought conflict, but if destruction is what you desire, we will oblige. It was a calculated risk, one last attempt at diplomacy, while simultaneously positioning their forces. The Vorkarians' response was immediate. Their massive weapons platforms began powering up. "They're taking the bait," Elena murmured. "Now let's hope Zhang can deliver the real surprise." Deep within the Vorkarian flagship, Dr. Zhang and his team were about to do exactly that. Defiance of the stars. Within the cavernous halls of the Vorkarian flagship Eternal Dominion, Dr. Weizong maintained a carefully neutral expression as he and his team were escorted through corridors of shimmering metal. The Vorkarian guards, towering figures with elongated limbs and that distinctive four-eyed gaze, regarded the humans with what Zhang interpreted as contempt. The harmonic disruptor, disguised as a diplomatic translation device, hummed softly against his chest. Its power cells, currently dormant, contained enough energy to temporarily destabilize the quantum shields of the entire fleet, if positioned correctly, and if Dr. Chen's calculations were accurate. They were brought to a vast chamber where High Admiral Zelvox awaited, flanked by a dozen officers. In person, the Vorkarian leader was even more imposing than in his transmission, nearly 3 meters tall, with ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb and redirect light in hypnotic patterns. "So the humans send envoys when destruction is imminent," Zelvox said, his voice carrying that same unnatural resonance. A futile gesture. Zhang bowed slightly, following the protocol Dr. Chen had outlined. "We come seeking understanding. Our records show no territorial conflict with the Vorkarian Empire. We believe there has been a misunderstanding." Zelvox made a sharp gesture that Zhang recognized as dismissal. "Your deception continues. We intercepted your ascension protocols, your plans for galactic domination. Your species advances too rapidly, develops technology too quickly. You are unpredictable, dangerous." "Project Ascension is a scientific initiative," Zhang countered. "Its purpose is exploration, not conquest." "Enough," Zelvox thundered. "Your time expires, and with it, your world. This audience is merely a courtesy before your extinction." Zhang nodded imperceptibly to his team. It was time. "Before you execute your attack, Admiral, perhaps you would examine our translation device. It contains records that may clarify our intentions." As expected, a Vorkarian scientist stepped forward to scan the device, exactly as Chen had predicted. Their arrogance was their weakness. They believed their technology so superior that nothing humans possessed could pose a threat. The scanner passed over the harmonic disruptor, and Zhang held his breath. A moment passed, then another. The scientist turned to Zelvox. "It appears to be a simple data storage and translation device, Admiral. Primitive, but functional." Zhang exhaled slowly. The disruptor's shielding had worked. "Very well," Zelvox said dismissively. "You may present your evidence, though it will change nothing." This was the moment. Zhang activated the device under the guise of accessing data. In reality, he was initiating the power-up sequence for the disruptor. He needed 3 minutes for full charge, 3 minutes to keep the Vorkarians talking. "Admiral," Zhang began, "our records indicate that the first contact between our species occurred when you intercepted transmissions from our Ganymede research station approximately 5 Earth years ago. Is this correct?" Zelvox narrowed his 4 eyes. "It is. Those transmissions contain technical data about Project Ascension, including propulsion theories and potential applications of dark matter technology. Your interpretation was that these were weapons developments." "The applications were clear," Zelvox stated. "Your species sought means to project power across vast distances." Zhang nodded, watching the disruptor's hidden charge indicator slowly climb. "A reasonable assumption, but incorrect. May I ask if your translation of our language is based on mathematical principles or cultural context?" The question caught the Vorkarian scientist off guard. "Mathematical principles form the foundation, of course. Your simplistic language was easily decoded. And therein lies our misunderstanding," Zhang said. "Human language is highly contextual. The word projection in our technical documents refers to theoretical modeling, not weapon deployment." He was stalling, but he could see a flicker of uncertainty pass across the Vorkarian scientist's features. 2 minutes remaining. Back on the Intrepid, Commander Elena Reyes watched the seconds tick by, tension building across the command deck. Zhang's hidden camera was transmitting everything, and the ship's AI was providing real-time translation of the Vorkarian responses. "All ships in position," Jackson reported quietly, waiting for the disruptor signal. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Earth's fleets were arranged in a defensive shell around the planet, seemingly conventional, but actually positioned for the synchronized attack that would follow the disruptor's activation. 1 minute, she whispered. On the Vorkarian flagship, Zhang continued his diplomatic misdirection. "Perhaps we could establish a joint scientific commission to review the translations. A peaceful resolution benefits both our civilizations." Zelvox's patience was clearly waning. "Your time expires, human. Your attempts to delay the inevitable are transparent." The disruptor hit 80% charge. Zhang needed just 30 more seconds. "Admiral," he said, allowing urgency to creep into his voice, "war between our species is unnecessary. The resource expenditure alone." "Resources?" Zelvox interrupted with what Zhang recognized as the Vorkarian equivalent of a laugh. "Your species cannot comprehend the resources at our disposal. Our empire spans thousands of worlds. Earth is nothing but an irritation, a potential future threat to be eliminated now, before you evolve further." "Then why the ultimatum?" Zhang pressed. "Why not simply attack?" "Protocol," Zelvox replied dismissively. "And perhaps curiosity, to see how the humans would face their end." The disruptor reached full charge. Zhang met the Admiral's 4-eyed gaze directly. "Then let me show you." He pressed the activation sequence. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then a pulse of energy, invisible to the naked eye, but devastating to the precisely tuned frequencies of the Vorkarian quantum shields, erupted from the device. Alarms immediately blared throughout the flagship. Zelvox roared in fury as the ship's systems reported catastrophic shield failures across the fleet. "Now," Elena shouted on the Intrepid, and Earth's fleet moved as one. The human counterattack was neither overwhelming nor technologically superior. What it possessed was precision and perfect timing. As the harmonic disruption created momentary gaps in the Vorkarian shields, Earth's ships fired specially designed kinetic penetrators, simple in concept but devastatingly effective when shields couldn't stop them. On the tactical display, Elena watched as dozens of Vorkarian vessels registered critical hits in the first salvo. The massive ships weren't accustomed to taking direct damage. Their entire warfare doctrine was built around their impenetrable shields. "Second wave, launch," she ordered. This time, the human fleet deployed EMP warheads designed to exploit the now exposed Vorkarian systems. Ships that had survived the first attack suddenly found their propulsion and weapons systems failing. On the Vorkarian flagship, chaos reigned. Zhang and his team had been seized immediately after the disruptor activated, but the device continued to pulse, preventing the shields from reestablishing. "What have you done?" Zelvox roared, seizing Zhang by the throat. Despite the alien's crushing grip, Zhang managed to smile. "We showed you the truth about humanity, Admiral. We don't want war. But when threatened, we adapt. We overcome. You studied us for years, but you missed our defining characteristic. We are at our most dangerous when cornered." The flagship shuddered as a series of impacts rocked its hull. Without its quantum shields, even the mighty Eternal Dominion was vulnerable. "Impossible," the Vorkarian scientists gasped, staring at displays showing the fleet's devastation. "Their weapons are primitive. They cannot." "It's not about the weapons," Zhang interrupted, even as Zelvox's grip tightened. "It's about the timing. The precision. You thought us beneath you, so you never considered we might find your weakness." The ship lurched violently as more impacts registered. Zelvox released Zhang, barking orders to his officers. The Vorkarian commander's composure had shattered, replaced by disbelief and rage. In orbit around Earth, the battle had transformed from certain annihilation to something unprecedented, a human fleet holding its own against a supposedly invincible enemy. The harmonic disruptor's effects were temporary, but devastating. As Vorkarian ships struggled to recalibrate their shields, they remained vulnerable to precisely targeted strikes. "Their formation is breaking," Jackson reported, unable to keep the amazement from his voice. They're retreating, Commander." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "Not retreating yet, Lieutenant. Regrouping. But we've shown them we're not helpless. Open a channel to their flagship." When the connection established, Elena faced the enraged visage of Zelvox directly. "Vorkarian Command, this is Commander Elena Reyes of Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is compromised, your tactical advantage neutralized. We have demonstrated our capability, but unlike you, we do not seek your destruction. Stand down, and we can negotiate terms that respect both our civilizations." Zelvox's 4 eyes blazed with fury. "This trick changes nothing, human. We still possess the power to reduce your world to ash." "At what cost?" Elena challenged. "How many more ships are you willing to lose? How will you explain to your empire that the primitive humans devastated your supposedly invincible fleet? We have transmitted the specifications of our harmonic disruptor to every human colony and outpost. Attack us again, and you will face the same defense, perfected and enhanced." She let that sink in before continuing. "You misunderstood us, Admiral. Humanity doesn't seek conquest. We seek knowledge, exploration, coexistence. But we will defend ourselves with everything we have. You chose war. Now you've witnessed our power." The communication remained silent for several long moments. Elena could almost see the calculations happening behind those alien eyes, the recalibration of threat assessments, the sudden uncertainty where absolute confidence had reigned. Finally, Zelvox spoke. "The Vorkarian Empire does not negotiate with lesser species." "Then don't consider it negotiation," Elena replied evenly. "Consider it mutual recognition of capability. Release Dr. Chen and the Horizon crew, withdraw your fleet beyond Neptune's orbit, and we will return your officers currently held on our vessels, including Dr. Zhang and his team." Another long pause. "You have deceived us," Zelvox finally said, his tone cold but controlled. "Perhaps the Vorkarian understanding of humanity requires reassessment." It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't rejection either. Elena pressed her advantage. "I propose a 3-day ceasefire while both sides tend to their damaged vessels and crews. During that time, representatives can establish terms for a more permanent arrangement." Zelvox's gaze was impossible to read. 3 days, he finally said. "No more. The terms of this ceasefire will be transmitted within the hour. The communication cut. Around the command deck, the tension that had held everyone rigid for hours finally began to ease. Did we just win? Lieutenant Santos asked incredulously. Elena shook her head. We survived. That's enough for today. The following days brought tense negotiations, the return of Dr. Chen and her crew, thin and bearing the scars of their captivity, but alive, and the gradual withdrawal of the Vorkarian fleet. The ceasefire extended to a tentative diplomatic channel, and eventually to a grudging recognition of human space. 6 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned EDF Phoenix, gazing at the stars. The Vorkarian threat had receded but not vanished. Earth had gained a reputation among the galactic powers. A young species, yes, but not one to be underestimated. Commander, Jackson said, joining her at the viewport. The diplomatic corps reports the Vorkarians have formally recognized our territorial claims. It seems they've decided we're more useful as trading partners than enemies. Helena nodded. They still don't understand us. Not really. They see our technology, our tactics, but they miss the essence of what makes humanity resilient. Which is? She turned from the stars to face her officer. Hope, Lieutenant. No matter how overwhelming the odds, we believe in possibility. That's what the Vorkarians couldn't comprehend. That our greatest strength isn't in our weapons or shields, but in our refusal to accept defeat as inevitable. As the Phoenix continued its patrol along the new boundary of recognized human space, Elena thought about the message they had sent to the galaxy. Humanity didn't want war, but when threatened, they would defend themselves with unexpected ingenuity and fierce determination. The stars no longer seemed cold and distant, but full of possibility. And now, the galaxy knew that humanity had earned its place among them.